All right, welcome. We have a few bills to do today. We're going to start with House Bill 251. I think that's a departmental bill. I think Deputy Secretary White is here with us. Come on up. And if you have anyone else on your panel, Ms. Sutherland, yep, you can come up. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Bonds and members of the committee. My name is Carnitra White, and I serve as the Principal Deputy Secretary for the Department of Human Services. With me on the panel is our Inspector General, Mother Sutherland. We respectfully urge your favorable report for House Bill 251 with the conforming amendments to the Senate passed bill. We at DHS are driven by the 12 Moore Miller values, and we believe this bill upholds the values. House Bill 251 enables DHS's Office of the Inspector General to extend the audit cycle for our local departments of social services from 3 years to a minimum of every 4 years. The legislation builds on the OIG's strong track record of safeguarding program integrity, ensuring compliance, and supporting the department's mission to empower Marylanders. Currently, the OIG conducts financial and compliance audits for our 24 local departments of social services to help us achieve our programmatic goals. Under the current 3-year audit cycle, the increasing complexity of audits frequency results in an overlap between the 2 audit cycles. For instance, a local department is in the process of implementing their corrective actions when the next audit cycle begins. House Bill 251 addresses this challenge by extending the current audit interval from once every 3 years to at a minimum of every 4 years. It also ensures that the local departments have time to complete and implement the corrective actions before the next audit cycle starts. This bill does not reduce oversight. The bill authorizes the OIG to determine the audit cycle frequency based on the oversight needs of each local department of social services. The bill maintains a regular audit cycle for each local department of social service. This approach more efficiently allocates resources, ensuring local departments who need the most support and oversight receive it. Adopting the flexible audit schedule actually strengthens the OIG's ability to safeguard program integrity, as well as ensure compliance with state laws and continue supporting the improving service delivery to Marylanders. You will see in our written testimony conforming amendments to the bill as it was reported out of the Senate Finance Committee to further clarify the intent of this bill. We appreciate the opportunity to give favorable testimony with these conforming amendments and welcome any questions you may have.
Information, okay. Are there any questions? Okay. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Concludes the bill hearing. Next up, House Bill 266, also a departmental bill. David Mayer, Leif Solomon.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes and members of the committee. I'm Leif Solomon, acting chair of the HERB. And the bill before you is basically contains some housekeeping amendments. We finished the first year of the PERB, and there's certain things to be addressed. The first one was that it's not limited to COVID or other national emergencies for unions to meet with new members. So we would let them meet however they choose to meet with them. The second is that the statute limited our deputy directors to certain subject matter cases, and we would just lift that limitation, and will be lawyers, are lawyers, and we would let them handle whatever cases come before us. And the third is that we don't need 10 days for any in-person elections That would be unworkable and unnecessary. And finally, we had a proposal about dues deductions, which in discussions with the Senate Finance Committee, we have agreed to amend and strike that provision as unnecessary. So I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Oh, thank you. In referring to the Boost program, you said strike. Dues. Oh, dues. I'm sorry. I got you. I appreciate that. Thank you. No questions.
Okay. No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Solomon, no relation, but I appreciate your last name. Just very quickly, you're comfortable with the version as it's coming out of the Senate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I am. I wasn't sure if I could.
Correct, David Barr. That's, oh, thank you. Sorry, I didn't hear that I'd been called. Briefly, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is David Marr. I'm an attorney at KSC Law. We represent AFT Maryland and other public sector unions throughout the state of Maryland and practice in front of the Public Employee Relations Board quite often. We're simply here, we're asking that the committee recommend or adopt the amendments that have already been adopted on the Senate side. Dues deduction for executive branch employees is already covered by a provision in the State Personnel and Pensions article that's long predated even the exclusive representative collective bargaining that was introduced here in the late 90s. It's part of Maryland's long tradition of allowing employees the free determination of what union they would like to associate with and pay dues to. And so we urge the committee to adopt the amendments that have been adopted on the Senate side, which retains that statutory structure.
Already on its way?
I believe it's already crossed over.
It's already crossed over?
Yes.
Okay, we'll probably just wait and deal with the Senate bill then. All right, any questions? All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Dave. That concludes the bill hearing. Move on to House Bill 794. Tiara Thomas, Keith Colston, Carrie Lessard, Norris Howard, please come on up. You can all come on up and decide who's testifying for the administration. Your time is unlimited. Everyone else has 2 minutes. I've called your name. Come on up.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present in front of you today. My name is Tiara Thomas. I am the chair of the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, but I also come to you as an enrolled citizen of the Piscataway Conoy tribe. I did submit written testimony as well, and I urge you guys to move this out of committee. This bill not only is going to allow for tribal citizens to be able to represent their culture and history through their own lens, through their own voice, but also will help in education. I come to you as an educator and as a parent. In 2002, MSDE updated the social studies frameworks to include specific language related to the Piscataway Conoy tribe and the Akahanic tribes. Well, there is no way for us to tell that story without having to urge citizens to do that, and it costs money to do that. It costs for us to be able to have a place to be able to do that. So we rely on third party and other organizations to tell those stories for us, and then we have to go out and grant seek as small nonprofits often because we're not federally recognized tribes here in the state of Maryland. So as an educator, to be able to have money to be able to tell those stories through our own voices, but also make sure that our tribal citizens have economic growth through this is really important to me and to the citizens of the Piscataway Conoy tribe. I think that for a long time, you know, we've been trying to make sure that our voice is heard. It wasn't until 2012 that we actually gained state recognition. So it's taken, again, another 13 years pioneers for us to be able to say, what does that mean to us and how can we tell our own stories within the state of Maryland? And we've taken steps through MSDE and through things like the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, but we really need to give agency back to the tribes to be able to tell their own stories. Thank you.
Chairman Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and also members here of the House Appropriations Committee. Thank you for the opportunity for me to sit here as the Administrative Director for the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs and address each and every one of you. Pertaining to House Bill 94, Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, Indian Heritage and Cultural Grant Program and Fund, it's very fitting that I provide you a greeting in my own tribal language to represent, again, what this bill is about and so much more. Swat, Wagachinet, Gane, Githre, Wagachinet, Nyawe. Saying that, hello, I'm glad to be here, I'm glad that you're here. Just a small example of what, again, cultural awareness can do, and of course, being able to share this with a variety of others. I'd like to respond and provide my time here concerning the outcomes of House Bill 794. Cultural programming continues to play a vehicle support in education and prevention, entrepreneurship, and leadership. By providing a financial source, tribal communities can structure a program utilizing history and culture. The proven byproducts are the following, yet not limited to: decrease in generational gaps, depression, loneliness, and suicide, an increase in education, motivation, and self-awareness, cultural pride, graduation rates, small business, and preparation of youth to become leaders inside and outside their communities. Direct and indirect outcomes will play a role in conservation efforts, the arts, history, health, secondary education, civics, community activism, and legislation. 13 tribal entities that we currently engage on a regular basis with, of course, Maryland Commission on Affairs, and over 120,000 Marylanders that recognize their ethnic background as being American Indian and other, and the 24 counties throughout the state that somehow, some way, indirectly or directly, again, working or connecting with American Indians in one form or another. Supporting House Bill 794 supports cultural awareness leading to cultural competency for Indian/indigenous peoples of Maryland, as well as for Marylanders in general. Highlighting the history and culture of Eastern Woodland, East Coast tribal history and culture that unfortunately at times gets overlooked. By doing so leads to an economic impact, opportunities and resources in arts and programming utilized in such areas as agriculture, history, education, and tourism via cultural consultants and cultural interpreters. There is a need and desire for funding and support for a severely marginalized group, many times as we are referred to minorities or simply other, to the point that we actually are wearing pins because we want to fight that situation of not being referred to as other, but be referred to as American Indians, Native Americans. I humbly request your support in passage of HB 794, paving a brighter path for tribal youth and Maryland's commitment to her indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, who are we looking for? Hey, Carrie, you're on. Welcome, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the House Appropriations Committee. My name is Carrie Hawk-Lassard, and I'm the Executive Director of Native American Lifelines, which is a Title V urban Indian health program funded by the Indian Health Service. I'm also a former Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs Commissioner. I am here to voice my strong support for House Bill 794. This bill is not just about cultural preservation. It is a matter of health and well-being for Native communities in Maryland. As we know from research and lived experience, cultural disconnection is a key factor in health disparities faced by Native people. When our traditions, language, and identity are reinforced, we see improvements in mental health, educational success, and overall well-being. The culture as prevention approach is well documented. When Native people engage with their heritage, they build resilience against substance use, suicide, and chronic disease. Yet for many Native people in Maryland, access to these cultural connections is limited. This grant program provides critical resources to sustain and revitalize Indigenous traditions, ensuring that our youth, families, and elders can thrive. By passing House Bill 794, Maryland has an opportunity to affirm that Native people belong, that our history matters, and that our well-being is a priority. I urge you to support this bill and invest in the health of Maryland's Native communities, and I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Let's pull up the next virtual witness, please. Okay, Norris, you're on. Connect, and you have 2 minutes. Norris, are you with us? Okay, do we have another virtual witness who's on and ready? Is Rico Newman ready? Not in the waiting room? Okay, we're going to give about 10 more seconds, then we're going to move on to the next bill. Okay, Norris. Okay, if you have YouTube or another way that you're watching this on, you need to close those programs and just have the actual live feed. And Norris, you're going to have 1 minute now.
Let's kick me out of the damn meeting. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. I apologize for the technical difficulties there. My name is Norris Howard Jr. I am here on behalf of the Pocomoke Indian Nation. We are a descendant tribal entity located on the Lower Eastern Shore of Maryland. Our homelands include all of Somerset County, portions of Wicomico, and portions of Worcester County, Maryland. I'm here today specifically with respect to the language within this bill. While I am in support of the bill, I am so with amendments which I have submitted previously in writing and would be part of this record. And I would encourage the members of the committee to review those. The language specifically creates, as it currently is written, creates some ambiguities as to which groups this applies to and exactly how it would apply. We've heard mention today of state-recognized tribes. However, there are tribal entities and communities within Maryland that are not recognized as such in a formal manner. And those communities, while it's my understanding the intent of this legislation is to include those communities, the language does appear to be somewhat ambiguity with respect to how this would be applied moving forward. I have sought 2 legal opinions on the current language and gotten 2 different, remarkably different opinions on that. So as to avoid future problems and specifically court actions were it be necessary, I would like for the committee to review the language as I've outlined in
We will.
my
Thank you.
comments.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
We will look at those, and I'll ask you to also bring those to the department to get their feedback as well. But if you send them to the committee, we'll make sure we look at them. Norris, thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you for being with us, sir. I appreciate you flagging the issue for us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a great day. That concludes the bill hearing. I'm going to move to House Bill 228. Someone to hear from the administration. I don't see anyone signed up from the administration. 228. Okay, I'll do it. Departmental bill expands the purposes of Maryland Veterans Trust. There's one unfavorable. Jason Spiegel, are you here? Come on up.
Chair Barnes and members of the committee, I'm Jason Spiegel, president of the Maryland Military Coalition, and we recommend an unfavorable report on this bill. This bill would authorize members of the National Guard who are not veterans, as defined under federal law, to apply for financial assistance from the trust fund. Only veterans are currently eligible. The trust fund receives no state appropriated funds. Rather, the trust fund relies on private sector donations and a new income tax checkoff. The MMC opposes the bill because it does not authorize members of the Federal Reserve who are not veterans to receive financial support. We submit that if National Guard personnel are worthy of access to the fund, so too are all reserve component personnel who are in financial need and live and drill in Maryland. The Federal Reserve provides critical support to Maryland. For example, 23% of all Coast Guard uniformed personnel who responded to the Key Bridge collapse were Coast Guard reservists. There is no policy justification for excluding the Federal Reserve, and there is no cost to the state if the Federal Reserve are added as eligible trust fund recipients. There are only 1,000 junior enlisted Army Reserve soldiers who live and drill in Maryland. They suffer the same financial hardships as their National Guard counterparts. Yet this bill would bar your constituents who serve in the Federal Reserve and are hurting financially from receiving assistance. Governor Moore has eloquently stated that we must leave no one behind. Unfortunately, this bill intentionally and knowingly leaves behind Federal Reserve who are suffering financially, and there is no fiscal or policy reason for doing so. Accordingly, we strongly oppose this bill and ask for an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Okay, before we conclude the bill hearing, Carol, can you just reach out to the administration and tell them we sure would like them to show up for their bill hearings? All right. That concludes the bill hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
House Bill 691, Delegate Patterson, who knows how to show up for her bill hearings.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the House Appropriations Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Edith Patterson, sponsor of House Bill 691, which is tax relief and pensions equality for service members. I am so proud to represent this bipartisan legislation, which addresses inconsistencies in Maryland law and ensures uniform recognition and equitable benefits for all branches of the uniformed services. At present, our uniformed services include the 6 military branches that you well know and 2 non-military branches, the U.S. Public Health Service, Lynn, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is NOAA. By aligning Maryland's definitions with federal standards, this bill ensures consistent treatment and fair access to benefits for all 8 branches of the uniformed services. What does it do? It builds on legislation I introduced last year that updated Maryland's definition of armed forces to include the United States Space Force, aligning with Title 10 of the U.S. Code. This year, we're seeking further steps by incorporating the United States Public Health Service, PHS, and NOAA to these protections. And why is this needed? Simply because it's critical, because it addresses the inconsistencies in how Maryland law references and applies benefits to the 8 uniformed services by clearly defining uniformed services. And in the legislation, you see the various definitions. This bill ensures that Maryland law applies equitably to all services in this capacity. It does not, I repeat, does not create new underlying policies, but instead modernizes and clarifies existing language to achieve the following. And there are 4 objectives. One is to establish a standard definition of uniformed services. The second is to ensure equitable tax benefits. Third, to expand tax abatement for line of duty deaths. And fourth, to revise property tax credits. This legislation is pretty straightforward, and I have so many letters of support from the Maryland Military Coalition, from the House Veterans Caucus, and of course my supporter here, Lynn Nash, who will offer definition or any further explanation. And so, colleagues, I'm asking for a favorable report for House Bill 691. Thank you.
Thank you. So for the record, I'm Captain Lynn Nash from the Maryland Military Coalition. I'm a United States public health officer, served 30 years, 11 in the Army and 19 in public health. So the reason I'm here is obviously to support this bill, but it is one of a series of 8 bills. And throughout the entire series, we had one definitional error, and that is Maryland General Provisions 1-117. It was omitted from the bill, and we're asking it to be put back in. And the reason why is that's the piece in Maryland statute that grants us the term veteran, and we'd like to continue that. So over the past few years, you've seen me in front of you several times, and on a one-by-one basis, I've been trying to correct things along the way. I can continue to do that. So for example, last year we got public health and NOAA included in the Family Serve Act, which is offering a priority hiring for our spouses. This year I'm working on the Burial Equity Act to make sure that our service members also can be buried in a state cemetery. Let's stop doing this one-by-one stuff. Let's get all of this squared away. I asked for a favorable report on this bill with the amendment that the definition go back to including 1-117. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the bill hearing. Now move to House Bill 691, Delegate Embry. Delegate, I see there are 4 witnesses here favorable. It's okay if they come up?
I would appreciate that. Thank
All
you,
right,
Chair.
Jeannie Howe, Kathy Odell, Graham Coriel Allen, and Wesley Clark.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair and committee members. It's my first time here this year, and I was excited to come. So this bill comes out of sort of it's designed to solve at least 2 problems, and probably more as the panel members will talk about. The first is to respect the rights of artists, visual artists, when we pay for their work as a state. But the second is also to protect the public's interest in the artwork that we pay for, to make sure that it's preserved and maintained and respected over time. And so the bill, what it does is for all art that is commissioned as part of a project that receives state money, the goal of the bill is that the artist whose work is commissioned will not be required as a condition, be required in order to perform the work to waive their rights under federal law, which is the VERA, the Visual Artists' Rights Act, passed in 1990, or copyright, their copyright provisions that they have as an artist. So one thing I would add is we are looking at the possibility of adding an amendment or presenting an amendment to this committee that would make clear that even though it cannot be conditioned upon, their award cannot be conditioned upon waiver, they can still enter into contract negotiations that could include waiving portions of VARA if that was their decision after receiving the award. So we're not trying to prohibit all negotiations post-award, the bill would just be geared towards making sure that the award itself is not conditional on those waivers. So the artists will talk about very specific examples and what they're seeing across the state. But I just want to talk about in Baltimore City, we've seen artwork that the public has paid for with tax dollars disappear, just completely disappear, or be damaged negligently, intentionally, maliciously. And so we really think that this is about protecting state investment in our art and also protecting our artists. And with that, I will let the panel speak. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chairperson Barnes and Vice Chair Cheng. And I also want to thank Elizabeth Embry for bringing House Bill 961 forward. And thanks also to the co-sponsors, Delegates Acevedo, Boyce, Crutchfield, Kaufman, McComas, Pasteur, and Ruff. Public artist Thomas Wyans once said, Artists are visual historians, so public art tells the community what's really happening now. It reflects and preserves the times. In my role as an art historian, former UMBC faculty member, former chair of the Maryland Public Art Commission, and current arts writer on public art for Be More Art magazine, I would add, there's no public art without its artists having implemented their intellect, their creativity, and their productivity in standing up that public art. The artists then own that work forever, whether a state, city, county, corporation, collector buys the work and therefore owns it in material terms. While we as citizens and you as legislators cannot control what private corporations and collectors do with regard to the art they commission or own, we together can do what's right with regard to the art that a state commissions. Artists' intellectual and creative ownership of their public artworks has been protected by the Visual Arts Rights Act, VARA, since 1990, insisting that contracts for commissioned artwork include copyright protections, disallowing its disappearance, as has happened, to at least 13 pieces that we know of in Baltimore City. Cementing VARA rights by passing the bill before you is not only the right thing to do, but the most logical. For there's no public art without taxpayer monies having supported that work, to say nothing of a recent study that shows that public art in urban areas reduces crime rates by 15%. Please support HB 916. Thank you.
Thank you, chairs and the entire committee and Delegate Embry. My name is Graham Corral Allen, and I'm a public artist living and working in West Baltimore, where I employ 4 full-time artists as well as half a dozen seasonal artists through my public art and placemaking firm, Graham Projects. In May of 2023, I was contacted by a senior official for the city of Baltimore inviting me to propose multiple street murals for Artscape, which was funded in major part by the state. They invited me to create a massive crosswalk mural to beautify and enhance pedestrian safety at the intersection of Charles Street and North Avenue. My proposed $79,000 budget would have paid 8 fellow local Baltimore artists prevailing wages to install this 5,300 square foot pavement mural using high grade products that would be much more durable than paint, the same kind of stuff you see in bus lanes. After the proposal was approved, I submitted a contract written by my arts lawyer. The city rejected my contract and sent me their own alarming agreement rife with issues. My most concerning was that they required that I seek permission to publicize my own work and that the city would also take my copyright. Separately, the city also sent me a VARA waiver form to sign, depriving me of my right to attribution for the work as well as loss of protections for its long-term integrity. I did my best to explain that these requests were not fair to working artists and that this was not the norm in the public art industry. The official made it sound like it was beyond their control as the city lawyers were the ones making these contractual demands. In the end, I made the very tough decision on principle to walk away from the contract, forgoing what would have been a high-profile commission for me and a major source of income for me and my fellow artist workers. While I had enough work that year to keep my business going without the Artscape Commission, other artists needed the work more and decided to agree to the city's exploitative contract in order to secure that much needed income for them as working artists and parents. Any state-funded public art project should ensure that artists retain their copyright and VARA protections. I strongly encourage you all to vote in favor of HB 0961.
Hello, excuse me. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley Clark. I'm an artist out of College Park, Maryland. And for me, robust public art is a significant economic driver to cities and states. Placemaking, iconic art, architecture, parks, and bold civic landmarks drive tourism, create safe neighborhoods, and provide critical identity to cultural narratives. Every state is competing to have the best go-to cultural landmarks. Maryland, especially with our proximity to DC, is able to cipher off some of that tourism as well to our cultural landmarks. It is imperative that Maryland continue to lead with signature public art that defines the history, community, and future of the state. This legislation is to support artists, and our VERA rights will only help the state, only help the state to bring a higher caliber of national and international artists to enhance the state experience. Upholding our VERA rights is a priority in cities and states with preeminent art collections. These stakeholders know that top-tier artists are loath to waive these rights. Requiring artists to do so instantly impacts the caliber of artists who will submit to any opportunity, essentially making it a brutal self-edit by any agency requiring or requesting artists to waive VERA rights, as was just stated. The point of public art is to shine a light on culture, the culture of a state and city. We do not want to dim that light by any means, or dim the caliber of artists, again, like I said, that we attract to the state. I urge the committee to favorably vote for this bill.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing us to testify on behalf of HB 0961. My name is Jeannie Howe. I am the Executive Director of the Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance. We serve every year over 1,000 artists through multiple programs, but primarily through the Baker Artist Portfolios Program. And we have given 2 artists grants in the amount of $1.4 million. Our organization serves not only Baltimore City, but Baltimore County, Howard County, Anne Arundel County, Harford County, and Carroll County. So we have a regional reach and can see really what's going on behalf of artists throughout the region. We know firsthand how important it is to provide these kinds of protections for artists and to protect the public investment in such artworks. The cultural sector makes a $13 billion with a B dollar impact on Maryland's economy and is responsible for over 80,000 jobs. When we talk about having artists on certain projects, that is job creation. Those are jobs that are being offered that otherwise would not have been available. In actuality, those numbers are much larger, as they do not adequately reflect artists who operate independently as small businesses throughout the state. Small businesses with little or no access to legal services in the event that they need them. The work of artists in public spaces, as you've heard, draw visitors to cities, towns, and small communities while generating business for not only themselves, but ultimately for restaurants and bars, garages, and other centers of commerce for those communities. Public art in spaces reflect the communities in which they are installed and offer opportunities for contemplation, interaction, and again, for tourism. Thank you so much for considering this bill. We urge you strongly to support HB 0961. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for this work you do in support of the arts. And Delegate, thank you for the bill. Questions for the sponsor or the panel? Delegate Metzger.
Thank you, Delegate Emery, for bringing this bill. Just a question or two. Your mom is an artist, correct?
She's not only an artist, she's here in the room.
I need to express, you have some beautiful art at Live Casino, and I've admired it, and I just want you to know I really loved it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Delegate Embry, for bringing this bill. I just want to know, is it true that this bill has no fiscal note?
Thank you, co-sponsor Delegate Rush. That is absolutely true, and no opposition.
No opposition, and anybody on the panel, is there any reasonable rationale for these types of waiver clauses in these contracts?
Zero.
No, I think Graham used the correct word in saying that it was exploitive of the businesses the artists are represented.
Understood. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Delegate, help us understand the amendment. So this would allow
So there are circumstances we understand. We've been hearing from all different sectors of the arts community, and there are circumstances where, because of the specific nature of the project, there is a reason to have negotiations, and possibly that would include some waiver of VAR. And VAR, I should say, there's 2 categories. One is attribution, so that the work cannot be misattributed to a different artist. And the second is preservation. And so sometimes that gets complicated if the art is built as a mural or is incorporated into the building. So sometimes it makes sense that an artist might want to negotiate the specifics.
Or if they got consideration for it.
Or if they got consideration for it, exactly. So we want to I think what we're looking to do, and I'll be talking to the drafter, is just being clear that this is about conditioning the receipt of the award, but not disallowing all negotiation. Does that
As a
make
condition
sense?
precedent.
Correct.
Not as something that could be negotiated. Okay.
Thank
Make
you.
sure we get the amendment.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thanks for being with
Thank
us.
you
Thanks
so
for the bill.
much. Thank you.
Thanks for all your work. Close the bill hearing. House Bill 76, Delegate Lehman. And Delegate, I see you have, there's 4 witnesses in favor of the bill. Is it okay if we call them up with you, or
Panel up, Mr. Chair.
is that okay with you, Delegate? Yeah? Okay. Jane Dermott, Joel McCray, Hope Larson, Sarah Laird. Come on up, and Delegate Lehman, nice to see you.
Ready? Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and esteemed Appropriations Committee members. For the record, I'm Delegate Mary Lehman, asking your favorable report on House Bill 76. This is a bill I brought back from last year. The committee heard the bill and did not vote on it. So the bill will provide death and disability benefits for qualifying Maryland public safety personnel who either die by suicide or become permanently disabled due to job-related post-traumatic stress disorder or other mental health conditions. It's modeled after a federal law that was passed by Congress and signed by President Biden in August 2022. The bill will amend the Maryland Public Safety article to make its death and disability benefits for work-related trauma match provisions in that federal law. The bill would extend those benefits to law enforcement officers, correctional officers, volunteer or career firefighters and rescue squad members, public safety aviation employees, hazardous materials response team employees, certain persons who served in either Afghanistan or Iraq, and 911 call takers. The addition of those 911 dispatchers is the only difference between the 2024 bill and this year's bill. First responders face tremendous stress, which all of you obviously know. Research has found that they are highly susceptible to a range of mental health and substance abuse problems, including suicide, depression, alcoholism, and drug abuse. According to a September 2022 article in Psychiatric Times, those trends have continued to increase negatively among members of those professions. An April 2021 study by the Centers for Disease Control entitled Suicides Among First Responders, A Call to Action. CDC confirmed that occupational stress in first responders is associated with increased risk of serious mental health issues, including hopelessness, anxiety, depression, PTSD, suicidal behavior, including suicidal ideation and actual attempts. So please vote to extend disability and death benefits to the men and women of Maryland who protect us and provide them the protection and coverage that they and their survivors deserve. Thank you, and I ask for your favorable consideration of House Bill 76.
I wasn't sure which left. One. My name is Janet Demerit. I'm here today to testify favorably for this House Bill 76. I'm a volunteer fire chief. Sadly, one of my most dedicated military veteran, hardworking volunteers committed suicide. He was a very dear friend of mine. The call was, I just can't take it anymore. There was nothing for him before he committed suicide. And sadly, after the event, there was nothing really in place thereafter. Our volunteers come from all walks of life. We go from those that are in med school, those kids that have no money that are in our stations that are going to college, to those that work construction. We're really across the board. And because we're across the board, so is their economic place in life. That also relates to their healthcare insurance. So for many volunteers, your healthcare insurance may not want to cover your mental health issues from your volunteer service, which creates a big issue for not only that volunteer, but for us writ large and their families. Sad to say that after Marty's passing, I had to face the family that there was nothing for his wife and children. He had a very long service life because the manner in which he died, there was nothing. So I would appreciate if you could support this. It brings hope. It brings things to those volunteers and those collectively that serve. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the House Appropriations Committee. For the record, my name is Joel McCray, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees for the Maryland State Firefighters Association, which represents and advocates for the volunteer fire, EMS, and emergency medical services personnel in the state of Maryland. The MSFA is in support of House Bill 76, which includes adding the diagnosis of PTSD, acute stress disorder, or a trauma or stress-related disorder to the list of disabilities that could be determined to be a result of performing the duties of a volunteer company or volunteer rescue squad member. In accordance with the Public Safety Article, Section 7202, the Board of Trustees of the MSFA are responsible for administration of the payouts of death and disability benefits to eligible members of the volunteer fire company or volunteer rescue squad. Now, although the benefits are administered by the Board of Trustees of the MSFA, these benefits are funded with annual appropriation of state funds. So in that vein, we would like to point out that the fiscal policy note incorrectly stated that the provisions related to the volunteer service have no effect on state expenditures, but they do. So keep in mind, if this bill is passed, increased funding may be required at some point in the future to fund these additional benefits. So I would like to conclude by saying that the Maryland State Firefighters Association is in full support of recognizing PTSD and other stress-related disorders as an occupational hazard for our members, and therefore request a favorable vote on this bill. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Hope Larson. I am a board-certified trauma counselor. I'm a member of the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress. I'm here today on behalf of the Maryland State Fire Chiefs, where I serve the role as a chaplain. I'm also a chaplain with the Baltimore County Police and Fire Departments. Those are just a few of the hats that I wear serving our first responders in the state of Maryland, and I do that at no charge. I just want to make that clear. My time with them, I give because of the importance of the work that they do for me and my family and for you and your families. I don't know if you're aware, but just on one website alone that tracks first responder suicides just this year, there have been 14 posted there. I know within the multiple agencies that I work with in the last 12 months, we also have experienced first responder suicides. Those are families left without a family member of a person who so selflessly served this state. The trauma we forget about. We look at first responders on TV and they run in and they save the day, they save a life. How many of us have thought, gosh, must feel good to do that? It does, but it also takes a toll. This bill will allow you to be that person who can save a life and make a difference that can make somebody feel like, wow, they did a great thing. I appreciate your time. I hope and ask for favorable consideration on this bill, not just for myself, but for all of our first responders that dedicate their lives to serving the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, members of the committee. My name is Sarah Laird. My husband, Battalion Chief Josh Laird, was killed in a fire caused by the failure of corrugated stainless steel tubing under lightning strike conditions on August 11th, 2021 in Frederick County. 3 months to the day after my husband's death on November 11th, 2021, firefighter David Esposito took his own life. David had been previously stationed with my husband. This is not an uncommon story, as first responders spend as much time with their partners and shift mates as they do with their families. First responders see us on our worst day. They see and experience the most horrific, unimaginable parts of humanity. And then they get up and return to work and do it all over again. On January 29th, Maryland first responders responded to the Potomac River crash and experienced a catastrophe not even seen at war. These repeated traumatic events leave wounds that are not visible to the eye, and sometimes, even with medical care, these wounds do not heal. There is no doubt that David's death was very different from my husband's. However, they were both a direct result of their job. Now I sit on the other side attending grief groups with first responder widows, yet we have a significant difference. Some of us are supported and some of us are not. Failure to recognize first responder suicide deaths as causal to their job is a tremendous injustice. Science tells us that irregular sleep schedules that first responders endure alone result in PTSD. The surviving family members made significant sacrifices even before their loved ones died. Yet during the darkest time of their lives, after they have watched their loved one battle an invisible disease, they are left alone in the cold to grieve without support or acknowledgement that their loved one served with honor and were not weak but broken. The federal government has already taken action to end this injustice. I ask Maryland to take action and provide a favorable report for HB 76.
Watching, very sorry for your loss, and really thank your husband for all his service to our state and community. Thank you. Any questions for the bill sponsor of the panel? Delegate Rice?
So is this a mandate? It looks like it's an opt-in for local governments. Is that correct? Because it appears that in order for this to take effect, there has to be done by resolution by the local governing body. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Are you asking, is it a mandate or is it opt-in? Is that the gist of the question?
Yeah, is it a mandate for the state, but an opt-in for the local governing bodies? Because it looks like in reading the fiscal note, I didn't see it in the bill, but looking at the fiscal note, it says for the local governing bodies to opt in, they have to do it by resolution. So
No,
they have a
thank you
choice
for-
of whether or not they actually want to participate.
Thank you for the
or not.
question, and I will have to follow up on that piece. I just got the fiscal note, shortly before the hearing, and I flagged that as well. As drafted, again, it's the same bill that I brought to the committee last year with the exception of the addition of the 911 call takers, and I don't remember that from last year's fiscal note, so that's something I have to check into, but it's meant to be, as the intention is that it's mandatory, the death and disability benefits.
The intent is that it is mandatory or is not? I'm sorry, is not, okay. I'm having a hard time hearing for some reason out of this here today. I didn't ask any question about boost or anything like that, so that's a good thing.
Yes. We've got Pat Moran. Jordan Barrow.
Antoinette Ryan Johnson.
Antoinette Ryan Johnson, and then we've got one virtual witness as well, Council President Cohen. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. I know we're pulling up our one virtual witness, and I think he is in the waiting room. Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you so much, Joel. Well, while we're waiting, for the record, Delegate Jared Solomon here to present House Bill 176. Good to be here with you all today. I think, as many of us know, our committee has obviously spent a tremendous amount of time dealing with the fallout and holding the Department of Corrections accountable for the death of the individual who we've named this bill after, Agent Davis Martinez. And I want to recognize several close members of Agent Martinez's family who are here today, his mother, Blanca Martinez, and his girlfriend, Gypsy Barrientos, who have been with us, I know, on a number of occasions. I just appreciate you all being here. And appreciate the work of so many of our colleagues who have, worked tirelessly to fix the situation at DPSCS. But the fact of the matter is that the situation that Agent Martinez found himself in one form or fashion is all too common. For many of our public servants, they work in places that are not safe. They work in conditions that we wouldn't want to tolerate if we knew about them. And so the entire crux of this bill, while it is named after and in honor of Agent Martinez and his selfless commitment to making our community better, it is for all of our public sector workers and all of our public servants. And we know that we've had two other instances, unfortunately, in Baltimore City, where two of our Department of Public Works employees, Mr. Ronald Silver II and Timothy Cartwell, lost their lives because of issues on the workplace. One in particular, Mr. Cartwell lost his life after a heat-related death, literally a month before heat standards were put in place. And we know that if that had not been mandated by the state, many of those heat standards, and that was at the work of the General Assembly, if those heat standards had not gone into place, they probably still wouldn't be to this day. And if they had been put in place before Mr. Silver's death, he would more than likely still be with us today. And so at the core, again, this bill is about taking, frankly, what we already apply to the private sector, and in many ways what is already on the books for the public sector in having a responsibility for having a workplace that is safe so that no worker should leave their home in the morning with any doubt in their mind that they may or may not come back because of the conditions of their workplace and the conditions of their employment. And so, this bill is about adding some accountability, again, the same type of accountability that we have for the private sector. It's about asking the Department of Labor to sort of focus in, create some new standards, and really make sure that this is a priority for them. So I want to just address a couple of things, because I know that there were some opposition testimony, and we've spent, frankly, a lot of time working collaboratively. I want to thank, I know we're going to hear from folks from MACO in a bit. We've worked really collaboratively with MACO. We've worked really collaboratively and closely with the Maryland Department of Labor. I want to thank Secretary Wu and her team, as well as some folks in the presiding officers staff, to make sure that we get this right. And so, I outlined really what the most important pieces of the bill are. We are creating a new unit. We're not adding necessarily new staff, but we are creating a dedicated unit within the Maryland Department of Labor, the Office of Occupational Health and Safety, to really hone in on public sector workplaces. We're also, I think probably most importantly, one of the most significant pieces here, I mentioned the penalty provisions are already on the books for private sector. So if you are a private sector employer and you are found in violation of occupational safety and health standards, you can be fined. Right now, we exempt the public sector from those. This is adding essentially the same fines that our private sector brothers and sisters are subject to, making that applicable to public sectors as well. Again, adding accountability in. And then most importantly, we are asking MOSH to create a standard for workplace violence prevention. Again, to address, specifically the issues for Agent Martinez, but for many, many, many of our public employees and public servants around the state. But again, we've made a lot of changes, so I won't go through everything. A number of them are listed out in my testimony, and there's a pretty lengthy sponsor amendment that, again, we've been working on collaboratively. But I just want to point out a couple of things. Again, we're not creating a new assistant commissioner position. That was part of the fiscal note piece, so I wanted to point that out. We made some tweaks to the fieldwork location provisions as well, again, in conversations with the Maryland Department of Labor and the folks at MOSH. We didn't want to create a new system. We didn't want to be overly duplicative. So a lot of what we're hoping they will, or what we're requiring them to do, they actually already have some of the authority to do. So we clarified places where that authority may have not existed, and made sure that was clear. We know the notification piece was something that we heard loud and clear from MACO and MML. Not every public sector employee has an email, so we tweaked some of the flexibilities there to make sure that, again, our public servants get the notifications and know when there have been violations in their workplace, and they know that things should be improving. But we want to make sure that we have some flexibility in there for public entities to be able to do that. This isn't requiring that everybody now gets a computer and gets an email account, which is, I know, a big concern that both MML and MACO raised. Also, again, we will likely be streamlining some of the penalty provisions. We added a few things in there, I think, for intent and purposes of what we're trying to accomplish, going back to sort of what is existing law, again, for private sector employers is pretty consistent with what we want to do here. And so you will see an amendment to streamline that as well. The only other point that I wanted to touch on before I turn it over to the panel, there was a letter of information from the Attorney General about sort of a potential conflict if you have an agency that is obviously, so obviously the Attorney General is also the attorney for state agencies. And so there was some concern that the AG's office raised of, well, if we're representing the agency that is receives the violation from the Department of Labor, but we also represent the Department of Labor, how do we handle that? I just want to make it clear that conflict, quote unquote, already exists. So again, we'll go back to the Department of Corrections example. The AG is both the attorney for the Department of Corrections and MOSH in the Department of Labor. And so the only thing that we're changing in this provision, in this bill, is the provision of applicable penalties. Agencies already are tagged with violations. There's just no real accountability for that violation. So we already have it. There are plenty of examples where a state agency chooses to contest a violation that MOSH may put in place. So again, the Attorney General's office already navigates that conflict. They have, internal conflict policies when one office has to defend one agency versus another. So we just wanted to put that out there that, again, that already exists, and what we're changing in this bill doesn't really impact the existing conflict there. So again, at its fundamental core, this is about making sure that none of our public servants ever have to wonder whether they're coming back at night, and making sure that we've got accountability and plans in place to make sure that our public workers are working in safe and healthy environments. And with that, I would urge a favorable report, and thank you very much, and turn it over to our panel.
Thank you, Chairman Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the committee. I'm Paul Lemley, nationally board certified social studies and special ed teacher from Howard County, serving as the president of the Maryland State Education Association, representing about 75,000 educators. The Maryland State Education Association strongly supports House Bill 176. Educators should feel safe in their classrooms, cafeterias, their common spaces, and school buses. And there are steps that we can take to prevent threats and injuries to school staff, such as those in this bill. Doing so not only improves educator safety, but improves safety for students and our ability to retain educators. Across the state, our members repeatedly identify safety as a priority for improving working and learning conditions. Like other public employees, Maryland educators currently lack comprehensive workplace safety protections. HB 176 establishes reasonable standards and proactive enforcement mechanisms to ensure public employers take their safety responsibilities seriously. By fostering a safer school environment, this legislation will help educators and students focus on teaching and learning, free of potential disruption and harm. MSCA supports additional interventions to bolster school safety, including embracing restorative practices and hiring more mental health professionals and support staff. House Bill 176 is a critical part of a holistic approach to protecting our students and educators, and we urge the committee to issue a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jordan Barab. I served as Deputy Assistant Secretary at OSHA during the Obama administration, 16 years running the Safety and Health Program of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and 4 years as a Senior Labor Policy Advisor for the House Education and Labor Committee. I'm speaking here today in strong support of the Davis-Martinez Public Employee Safety and Health Act. Public employees are at high risk. In 2022, public sector employees experienced 81% more injuries than workers in the private sector across the country. As we have seen recently in 3 preventable fatalities in the abysmal working conditions in the Baltimore Department of Public Works, just having OSHA coverage doesn't automatically make public employee workplaces safer. More must be done. This bill allows MOSH to issue penalties to public employers who violate the law. Penalties serve to incentivize violators to comply with the law. OSHA penalties are generally reasonable. The maximum federal OSHA penalties for a serious violation are just above $16,000, but average penalties are much lower. In fiscal year 2023, the average penalty for a serious violation was only $4,597 for federal OSHA and only $2,406 for OSHA state plans like Maryland's. But most public employer penalties are only a few $100s in reality. MOSH is required to consider the size, history, and good faith efforts of the employer when determining the penalty, and employers can engage in informal settlement talks to reduce penalties further. Although willful violations carry a penalty 10 times greater than serious violations, willful violations are rare. I would also want to stress the importance of the workplace violence standard mandated by this legislation. Public employees are at high risk from workplace violence. According to the 2018 report by the House Education and Labor Committee, state government health care and social service workers were almost 9 times more likely to be injured by an assault than private sector healthcare workers. I want to thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Renika Robinson, and I serve as the extremely proud president of ASME Local 3661. Our union represents community correction workers in the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Our mission is to keep our community safe and help individuals reintegrate into their communities. I am proud but also saddened to be here today to testify in support of House Bill 176. This legislation is named in honor of one of our fallen agents, Davis Martinez, who was murdered while conducting a routine home visit. Prior to this, we had warned our employer that our workers were facing safety risks and action needed to be taken. On the day he died, Agent Martinez left the field office in the morning to conduct a home visit of a parolee. Hour after hour went by, and Agent Martinez had not returned. It was discovered that Agent Martinez was murdered at the home of the parolee. Agent Martinez's death may have been preventable had our employer had proper plans, procedures, and the necessary personal protective equipment to keep agents safe. Recently, members of this committee were made aware of a citation issued to DPSCS by MOSH, which found that the department failed to furnish employment and a place of employment which were free from recognized hazards that were causing or likely to cause death or serious harm to employees. Additionally, the citation from MOSH recommended the development and implementation of a comprehensive and effective written workplace violence prevention program. The Davis-Martinez Act will require MOSH to establish a comprehensive workplace violence prevention standard to ensure all employees are prepared, trained, and knowledgeable on how to respond in situations that could otherwise cause them bodily harm or their life. Please support House Bill 176 to honor the legacy of Agent Davis-Martinez.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the House Appropriations Committee. My name is Antoinette Ryan Johnson, and I am a public employee who has been working for the City of Baltimore for almost 28 years. I am also the president of the City Union of Baltimore, AFT Local 800, the labor union representing thousands of employees working in various city agencies. In these capacities, I urge a favorable report to House Bill 176. We have submitted written testimony, so let me highlight a few points and take any questions you may have. The bill's provision that would lift the exemption for fines and penalties to public employees is of utmost importance. In 2019, the City Union of Baltimore lost one of our members, Ms. Trina Cunningham, in a workplace accident at the Patapsco wastewater treatment plant when she fell through a faulty catwalk above a tank holding untreated raw sewage. This accident was not only tragic, but preventable, as the subsequent inspection of the facilities done by MOSH found numerous serious workplace safety violations at the plant, including a failure to inspect and maintain walking surfaces on the catwalk above the cascading effluent outfall, which was the direct cause of Ms. Cunningham's death. At the closing conference between MOSH, the Baltimore City DPW, and the union to present MOSH's findings, it was revealed that MOSH found 24 serious safety violations at the Patapsco plant. After each of the violations listed on MOSH's report, the proposed penalty was stated as 0, meaning that despite these dozens of violations that can be a cause of death or serious injury, violations that would easily warrant a 6-figure penalty because of broken state occupational and safety laws, there would be no penalty for causing the death of this city worker. MOSH's closing conference document included in my written testimony, as you can see, at each serious violation, the proposed fine was $0. Our support for this bill is not so that we may bankrupt public entities. Our support for this bill is simply that there must be some financial incentive to make sure our public entities are doing all that they can to keep public employees safe. Public employment in Maryland is unfortunately a very dangerous job. And thanks to our broken workplace safety and health laws, it is not an exaggeration to say being a public employee in Maryland is general, and Baltimore in specific is one of the most dangerous jobs. Unfortunately, with 300 OSHA workplace citations over the past decade, we must do more to be sure that our public employees are safe at work. We again call for passage of House Bill 176. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's do this just to keep this a little organized. Let's take the 5 folks at the table here. Let's take questions, and then we can, Delegate, you can stay there, and Pat, you can move over when we're done with this panel. Questions, Delegate Grist.
I mean, I'm just reading the AG opinion on this. It says under current public law, public bodies are exempt from civil citations under the Maryland Occupational Safety and Health Act. So would this create a precedent? And then reading further down, I guess the second follow-up question would be, it looks like a conflict of interest in regards to attorney-client privilege. And then it's not a question, but can you address also, I guess it would be, can you address the concern that they'll have? I think they used the word deluge, or a deluge of appeals in the event that Division of Labor and Industry began a more robust inspection and citation process against public bodies. So they think that after this precedent set, there's going to be a large number of appeals that'll have to be addressed. So this is a pretty big deal, according to the AG, it sounds like.
So again, Delegate, thanks for the question. So in terms of the conflict of interest, that was what I addressed in my testimony. That the inherent conflict that he's referring to here, or that the letter refers to, already exists. So they already represent, and again, the AG's conflict would only be for state agencies. That conflict already exists. So the AG has, a division that covers the Department of Corrections, and obviously a division that covers the Department of Labor and MOSH. So the only thing that we are adding here is this accountability provision. Again, we are removing the exemption on the penalty piece, so that penalties would be applied to public entities. So, I mean, I guess there's a possibility that there could be more appeals, but we know that agencies are already appealing, you know, and Pat, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that and the examples that you all have of that. Or Chris.
Sorry, Chair Barnes. For the record, my name is Christian Goebel, Legislative and Political Coordinator with AFSCME Council 3. Just to follow up with Delegate Solomon, an example of this past year in 2024, at Perkins Hospital, there was a citation issued by MOSH against Perkins Hospital. Again, penalty in that case being $0, but they did decide to contest the citation. And again, another issue we would highlight here is the Public Employee Relations Board, which operates with an Assistant Attorney General to represent them in enforcement actions. And again, they have the authority to issue unfair labor practice charges against other state agencies, reinstatement orders for public employees, any back pay due. So these dynamics exist right now in our current system.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Patrick Moran. I'm the very proud president of AFSCME Maryland Council 3. Our union represents 45,000 public servants across the state of Maryland, from Western Maryland to Eastern Shore. AFSCME members are on the front lines every day to deliver the essential public services that our residents rely on. And without them, our communities could not function. Yet for too long, these workers have had to confront significant risks to their safety and health. This past year alone, we had 3 of our brothers die due to events on the job. Agent Davis Martinez, Ronald Silver II, and Timothy Cartwell all lost their lives due to events that occurred in their workplaces and were preventable. These men were far too young, and they leave behind loving families, friends, and coworkers. Not only did these members lose their lives, but many of our members are also confronted with dangerous situations every day in their workplaces. In just, for example, just one example, in just 2024 alone, 3 correctional officers at the North Branch Correctional Institution in Cumberland were beaten and stabbed on the job. Our state pays in many ways when our public employees are injured or die on the job, such as workers' compensation costs, mandated staff overtime to cover absences, and disability or death payments. Ultimately, when we fail to invest in workers' safety, our state pays, and workers and their families are left with the tragic consequences. By supporting this legislation and passing this bill, Maryland can send a strong message that our government cares about its public servants' workplace safety and health. This legislation will establish a unit within MOSH to focus on public employee safety and health, hold our public employers accountable with the same penalties Maryland's private sector employers face, and establish a workplace violence standard, prevention standard, excuse me. For all these reasons, we request a favorable report on House Bill 176. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat, is the secretary here to testify on this bill? Let's see her. Is she here?
Secretary Wu, I don't believe so, but they submitted, I think the Department of Labor submitted a letter.
Okay. All right.
Chair Barnes, I just want to flag, Commissioner Virk is here to offer testimony as well. Arthur, you want to go ahead?
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the committee. My name is Arthur Bonsu. I serve as an executive board member of ACE AFSCME 2250, representing the security service workers in our union. I am testifying in strong support of the Davis-Martinez Act. ACE AFSCME 2250 represents approximately 6,000 employees throughout Prince George's County Public Schools. Our union members make sure children arrive to and from school safely, operate and maintain the facilities of our public schools, provide security services, and do much more. It is an honor today to be here to testify in favor of this bill. In my security services role, I witness conduct each day that places the safety of students and staff at risk. Threats, fights, and assaults create an unsafe environment to work and learn in. Many of our members have had to take assault leave due to injuries they have sustained on the job. 2 years ago, we experienced a horrifying incident in which a student boarded a school bus and threatened to shoot individuals on the bus. Thankfully, no one was injured, but it could have ended in tragedy. I'd like to take a moment to explain how we could have improved that situation. Currently, bus drivers are told to communicate a code word over the radio for safety incidents like this. But we believe a more effective method is a button bus drivers can press that sends a frequency that alerts of an emergency. Additionally, other personnel can directly monitor the inside of the bus through the video camera system when this button is activated. This is an example of a measure where an employee could silently press a button to activate a warning without explicitly communicating in a dangerous situation. Moreover, they have the capacity to do this now, and this wouldn't cost any money. This is an example of how a workplace violence prevention standard could benefit everyone. A workplace violence prevention standard would make certain that workers and management collaborate to identify risk and hazards in their workplace and brainstorm ideas on how we can address those hazards. Management and workers can work together to come up with creative solutions to make our places of employment safer. Please pass this bill to help us create safer working environments for our staff. Thank you.
Again, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, thank you again. I'm just here to help answer any questions the committee has. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes and Vice Chair Chang and the members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Bill Chenoweth. I am a proud member of ASME Local 3888, and I have worked as a safety officer for the past 16 years in Howard County government. I'm here today to testify in strong support of House Bill 176. During my years of service in Howard County government, I have witnessed workplace conditions and practices that put workers in harm's way. For example, working in underprotected trenches, chemical exposures, violence, and many, many more. We have endured a recent onslaught of violence at parks, landfill, and with our inspectors trying to convey regulations. These encounters have been increasing in frequency and intensity. We've had threats to our members, even with weapons being brandished. During my tenure as a safety officer, I was instructed to change my reports, and when I refused, I was threatened to be placed on probation. I have completed incident reports of drastic injuries only to have the report ripped up and thrown away. One incident involved a member hit with a backhoe bucket, landed him in shock trauma for weeks trying to recover. Ultimately, this member was terminated because of seizure disorder. Most did give a citation, but we still have not completed our equipment program as indicated. The incident happened about 9 years ago. We also do not have mandatory respiratory programs for treatment plant or the landfill, both that deal with chemicals. The absence of penalties for violations of our workplace safety and health laws fosters a system that promotes indifferences and neglect to public employee safety. Public employees are asked every day to provide and perform crucial public services for Marylanders across this state, yet our safety does not feel though it is always valued. When our public employers break the law and face no consequences for those actions, I am here to urge the committee to issue a favorable report on House Bill 176 to promote safety and health working conditions for public employees. Thank you. Any questions?
We've got the one virtual witness. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this may be a question probably for the bill sponsor. Anybody can answer it. And I appreciate certainly why we're bringing the bill, to the forefront. Obviously, with our employees, we're interfacing with the public, and oftentimes you can't control anything that's going to happen. And we want to make sure we put as many protections as we can in place. But I guess my line of questioning has to do with more of the unintended consequences potentially with any piece of legislation. But with this one, I'm looking at page 15. Lines 25 through 31, it says a person who holds political office in the state, whether elected or appointed or any other position of profit or trust in the government of or in the administration of the business of the state or the county, municipality, or other political subdivision that violates any provision of this subsection of this section is guilty of a misdemeanor and on conviction is subject to a fine not exceeding $20,000 or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year or both. and then it talks about the potential sentence. Now, how would this impact the qualified immunity that some of these folks already have?
So I have an easy answer for you, Delegate, and thank you for the question. We're actually going to be taking that out of the bill. So this will just, the existing penalties that are already on the books will just be all that applies.
So you're going to strike that entire paragraph?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, we have two more in-person witnesses, Daviki Verk and Carrington Anderson, who are in favor of the bill. While they come up, Mr. Zeke Cohen, are you for Shamoya Gardner?
Yes, yeah, that's his legislative director, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the House Appropriations Committee. For the record, I am Zeke Cohen, President of the Baltimore City Council, in favor of House Bill 176. I have seen firsthand the devastating impact that a lack of clear, reliably enforced worker safety standards for public sector employees can have. Just last summer, Baltimore City lost one of our own, Ronald Silver II, on a day so hot, our own health department issued a code red heat alert. Unfortunately, help did not arrive fast enough for Mr. Silver, who died of hypothermia. And then just a few short months later, another public works employee, Timothy Cartwell, would take his last breaths on the job. Before that was Ms. Trina Cunningham, as mentioned by President Ryan Johnson. In the greatest state in the world, worker deaths are simply unacceptable. It will forever weigh heavy on my heart that we lost these great public servants. And I want to be clear, this is not an issue unique to Baltimore City. These issues impact jurisdictions across our state, and I want to thank the Davis-Martinez family for your public service and for being here today. In Baltimore, our Department of Public Works is a strong leader who's been working hard to rectify these historic patterns that allow solid waste workers to operate in unsafe environments. And I'm grateful to AFSCME and CUB, who have been long in this fight for safety. But sometimes changing culture means changing practices, and that means changing the law. CUB, AFSCME, and many other labor partners have expressed the clear need for more than questions and prayers and thoughts after such horrific incidents. They need us to take action to protect the workers who serve our city and our state. That's what this bill would do. For our public employees with multiple field locations, this added oversight could just be the layer of protection needed to ensure they all make it home safely after doing their part to contribute to a thriving city and state. For those reasons, and with respect to the families of Davis-Martinez, Ronald Silver II, Trina Cunningham, and Timothy Cartwell, I urge a favorable vote on House Bill 176. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's take questions for our virtual witness while he's here online. Are there any questions? Sir, I don't see any. Thank you for being with us. Lending your voices. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Carrington Anderson with the Maryland Association of Counties, speaking in support of House Bill 176 with amendments. First, I want to thank Delegate Solomon for working with us on this bill and appreciate some of your input on some of those amendments. So counties recognize and broadly support the intent of this legislation and think that it's a meaningful step towards public safety for our public employees. Our written testimony shows what MACO initially requested for amendments, but just to say that we've been working with Delegate Solomon and feel comfortable with the most recent Senate amendment, which just want to make sure it's the correct amendment, but we're pretty comfortable with that and think we're there. The amendments that we asked for has to do with the email provisions for when public employers send reports or citations to their employees. Delegate Solomon mentioned that not every public employee has an email, so we would just request that that could be made available, which is what aligns with what OSHA and MOSH currently request. And then the second one is just to strike the quarterly reports provision, just because it's duplicative and MOSH and OSHA already request that. For these reasons, we would request a favorable with amendment report on House Bill 176. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, members of the committee. My name is Daviki Verk.
I serve as Commissioner of the Division of Labor and Industry in the Maryland Department of Labor, and our division includes Maryland Occupational Safety and Health, which you've heard referred to in this hearing as MOSH. MOSH is deeply committed to its mission, and its mission is protecting workers and protecting their safety and health, and to improving compliance with our state standards and strengthening those standards themselves. With just a few exceptions, MOSH covers almost all of the 2.7 million people who work in Maryland in both private and public sector. As has been alluded to in this hearing, this past year has been a tragic one for on-the-job deaths of workers in our state. 4 of those who died worked in the public sector, in addition to the 3 members of AFSCME who have been mentioned, Mr. Silver, Mr. Cartwell, Agent Martinez. There was also Mr. Dyson, who worked for WSSC and was killed last year. Those deaths do not stand in isolation. The rates of non-fatal occupational injuries and illnesses are consistently higher in the public sector than in the private sector. And that's the case not only in our state, but in other states as well. And that's partly due to the fact that the public sector includes some occupations that are regularly exposed to serious hazards like firefighting, corrections, law enforcement, waste management. Risk is a given in these jobs, but tragedy should not be. These outcomes are not inevitable, and they are not acceptable in our state. We as a state must find ways to mitigate those risks and better protect the people who perform this critically needed, difficult work that serves us all and makes our communities safe and livable. This bill begins that process by placing a clear focus on public sector health and safety. We raised, after the Senate hearing, a number of technical concerns with the structural and operational aspects of the bill. We have worked cooperatively, and I believe that based on the draft amendments we've reviewed, those technical concerns have been addressed. I should add that we take no position on the penalty aspects of the bill. We do look forward to working with this body on any feedback that we receive. Should the bill become law, we look forward to working with all stakeholders to develop and implement the Workplace Violence Prevention Standard and take other appropriate measures to improve the focus and outcomes to better keep our public servants safe and healthy on the job. We ask for a favorable report of this bill with adoption of the suggested amendments. I'm pleased to respond to the committee's questions on technical or informational matters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, you both. Questions for this panel? Okay, thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
There's one party signed up in opposition. MML, I think, is here. Bill?
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, members of the committee. Bill George with the Maryland Municipal League here today in opposition to House Bill 176 as introduced. I want to thank both Delegate Solomon and cross-file sponsor Senator Kramer for working with us on amendments. We are in close alignment with our counterparts at the counties, so I won't reiterate those. We fully support those amendments that we've seen in draft form, and one of the final pieces of the puzzle was addressed by Delegate Grice's question earlier on the personal liability for public officials. With all of those taken in totality, conceptually, I think we're really close to being able to drop our opposition. And I just wanted to make it very clear that we are not, we are very understanding and supportive of the intent of this bill and workplace safety provided by local governments. This was in opposition to the words on the page as introduced, and we really appreciate the work of the sponsors on this and happy to continue to do so.
Okay, thanks for your testimony. Other questions? All right, we'll work to get you to favorable with amendments.
Maybe next time.
We just want to send our condolences again as a committee to the family of Davis Martinez and all the public employees that we've lost over the years. I know Ms. Blanca Martinez is here, and we just want to send our condolences again, as we probably won't have another hearing on this matter. So thanks again for all your service, all of our public employees. That concludes the bill hearing. Other than to say we'll get this bill moving as quickly as we can. House Bill 1090, Delegate Solomon.
slightly smaller group of witnesses. Again, for the record, Delegate Solomon here to present House Bill 1090, the SNAP for Students Act. And I just want to start off by again, thanking folks on the committee. This has been an issue that many of us have been working on for a number of years. You know, I don't think I need to tell you all, we have a food insecurity crisis among our college students. There was a recent survey that showed 20% of students at College Park within the last year had at one point or another been food insecure. And we know, obviously, if you're hungry, you're much less likely to graduate. You're much less likely to successfully complete your course of study and just be a successful student, whether it's in college or in K-12. And so a lot of us on this committee, have really tried to work constructively, obviously within our budget constraints, to do everything we can to make sure that no Marylander goes hungry. And so what we've been able to do with this bill is we think come up with a lot of really good policy improvements that don't cost a whole lot of money. So I will start out by saying we've made a lot of changes that completely, we think, nullify the fiscal note. So as drafted, the bill came in with a couple of different provisions that we were interested in working with the Department of Human Services on around students who essentially, so if you qualify for work study, you qualify for SNAP benefits if you are a college student. And then, so there were some policy issues around, well, if you qualify for work study because of no fault of your own, you may not necessarily have started your work study position yet. There may be limited work study positions, there may be limited hours, and that's not you as the student's fault. So there's a lot of flexibility within federal guidance around, as long as you qualify, you actually can become, you can automatically become eligible for food stamps. You don't necessarily have to have started the actual position because, again, the position may not kick in for 3 or 4 weeks. And so I want to really thank the folks at DHS. They were incredible to work with, particularly Melissa Bender on their government affairs team. And lo and behold, DHS has agreed to basically do everything that we were interested in doing in this bill through guidance. They're going to update the SNAP manual that gives instructions on how the SNAP program should be administered in the state. So you will see a sponsor amendment, or the subcommittee will see a sponsor amendment to strike basically all of those provisions from this bill. It's music to, I know, many of our ears when we don't have to legislate things, when agencies are really great partners. So that's coming out, and that was really the fiscal note. And the only piece that will be, that is in the bill, that will continue to be in the bill, and we have some folks here from MHAC, Dr. Dow is going to talk about this in a minute. We are essentially just adding a question to the MD CAPS application that every student in the state has to complete in order to get aid. And that is an optional question, so they do not have to answer it. But the question will simply ask, have you essentially, this may not be the exact wording, but have you experienced essentially, were you unable to afford a meal within the last 6 months? And so students will be able to self-identify that they haven't had the money to afford food, that they've been food insecure, or they've gone hungry. And what's really important about that is that information will then obviously go directly to the universities and our colleges, and then they can specifically reach out to students who more than likely would probably qualify for SNAP and just may not know, or may not know how to fill the forms out, or if they don't qualify for SNAP, direct them to resources. We know that many of our campuses have created food pantries and wraparound support programs that are really important. So I think the fiscal note on the tweak to MD CAPS is something like $6,000. So it's about as close to zero as we could get. And we know that this is really a best practice. A lot of health institutions are starting to do this. So even when you come into the emergency room, they'll ask you things like, have you had trouble getting food? And in this way, if you are food insecure, they will help direct you to resources. So this is just sort of best practice. How do we hone in on the students that really need the support and make sure that we're targeting our limited resources to the students that need it the most? So with that, I'm going to ask for a favorable report, and we'll turn it over to my panel. Brielle, you want to go first?
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My name is Brielle Penzini, and I'm a SNAP Outreach Anti-Hunger Program Assistant with Maryland Hunger Solutions, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization authorized as one of the official state outreach partners to support Marylanders navigating SNAP. I'm here today to offer our support of HB 1090 and to thank Delegate Solomon for sponsoring this bill. Applying for and maintaining SNAP benefits is already challenging for many because of the program's rigorous eligibility standards and administrative requirements. Successfully obtaining SNAP benefits is not an easy thing to do, often compared to doing your taxes, but with added recertification checkpoints throughout the year, depending on your demographic. For college students in particular, this experience can be made even more challenging by outdated or overly complicated policy. Much of what was listed in Section 1 of HB 1090 is already within the federal regulations, but it is only a small snippet of current student SNAP policy. On top of the income eligibility, students must meet at least one of 9 exemptions. This can be a major lift for case processing, as every campus and every student is different. Being a student does not always mean that you're a middle-class kid aged 18 to 24 getting support from your family, but it could also mean that you're an older adult, single parent, first generation, someone who is unhoused or with a disability, all of whom could be positively impacted by legislation like HB 1090. By requiring MHEP to include an optional question focused on measuring food insecurity to the MCAPS application, Section 2 of HB 1090 would allow the state to lay the foundation for capturing a simple understanding of the prevalence of food security on Maryland college campuses, which is significant because there's very little state-specific data that is up to date currently. It could also provide campuses the opportunity for outreach, specifically to students that may require additional support services. For those reasons, we ask for a favorable report on HB 1090. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon. I am Emily Dow. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Academic Affairs at the Maryland Higher Education Commission. Thank you, Delegate Solomon, for sponsoring this bill. This is a growing crisis across the higher education landscape affecting Maryland students' food insecurity. MHEC fully supports House Bill 1090, a critical change that would expand food access to students. We applaud this initiative to streamline access to food supplement benefits to eligible students. As you know, and as you just heard, college student demographics are changing. More and more students are either independent or have families of their own. Addressing food insecurity among college students is essential to ensuring their academic success and overall well-being. Many students struggle to afford nutritious meals, which can negatively impact their concentration, mental health, and ability to complete their education. We can create a more equitable learning environment by prioritizing food security, where all students have the opportunity to thrive. MHEC is committed to meeting the challenge faced by students seeking to achieve their educational goals, and this is one area MHEC would like to see addressed. In closing, MHEC fully supports House Bill 1090 and asks the committee for a favorable report. Thank you.
Bill sponsor and to the 2 witnesses for providing testimony. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the bill sponsor and witnesses? Delegate Grice.
You missed me.
I understand. I just want to clarify what we're trying to accomplish here. We know that there's a certain number of college students who qualify for this program. But they probably don't know how to access it, I guess. And so we're hoping that by adding this question onto their application that we can hopefully identify who these students are. And so my question is, and it has to do with the fiscal note, of course, is there any, and we may not know the answer, is there any unspent, I mean, have we spent all of our SNAP monies in the past? So is there a history of like having money available where there won't be a fiscal note attached to this? Do we know?
No, and I will defer to our dear colleague who knows the ins and outs of this, but no,
Okay.
and it's a...
Yeah, I didn't think we probably have the,
It's essentially it's a entitlement program that essentially we spend what when you meet the qualifications, we spend state money and then we get matching money from the feds.
Right, okay. And I would imagine that even though it looks like there's I guess they said 32,000 potential students, I guess. I'm sure that there's probably not a whole lot of science behind figuring that out, but.
Yeah, and part of the issue, which again, I really just want to really applaud the folks at DHS for working with us, is when you codify certain changes, and this is sort of the way that the fiscal note is written, and you'll remember, we had a couple of different bills to address this issue, because during the public health emergency with COVID, the federal government essentially waived all the requirements, and students were eligible for SNAP regardless of whether they met what is really a very difficult bar in many instances. And so when the public health emergency ended, we know food security was still there, and so we were trying to sort of figure it out. When you codify things the DLS folks assume that that exists in perpetuity, and that if the federal statute were to change and federal reimbursement rates were to change, then the state would have to pick everything up for every potential student. So what makes it so much easier for them to just put it in the manual is that can be changed more quickly, obviously, if federal law changes, and then it doesn't create the same kind of fiscal requirement that it would if it were put in statute and code.
Is there a sense from these universities how many students would realistically sign up for this that aren't now? I mean, I doubt 32,000 is going to sign up. I think that's seems like a pretty high number realistically. Did we get a sense from the institutions like what their thoughts may be?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a number of written statements from, I think, MICUA, the USM folks put stuff in. So higher ed is super supportive of this. I mean, I think, just because a student answers, if they choose to answer the question, that doesn't mean even if they've missed a meal or they haven't been able to afford it, that doesn't mean that they would then qualify for SNAP. But I think then, again, in College Park, I know the chair's not here, but College Park has a really amazing food pantry. Like literally they have a program where they teach kids how to cook as well. I mean, it looks like a little supermarket. It's not just available for students, it's available for staff as well. I think it's just an easier way for universities to be able to direct the students who really need it to the resources that they have. And, I think more broadly, we probably need to improve sort of the wraparound support system that we have in our colleges, community, and 4 years. And this is just another way for us to get there with how do we get the students who really need the support and are willing to self-identify that, have somebody then proactively reach out to them.
Any other questions for this panel? We have a virtual witness. We have Nicole Holt, who's joining us virtually. Okay, Nicole Holt, thank you for being here. If you could unmute and then provide testimony in 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barnes, Vice Chairman Chang, and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Nicole Holt, and I'm an undergraduate public health student at UMBC. I am here to support House Bill 1090. I represent tens of thousands of college students across Maryland who struggle daily to make ends meet. I am fortunate because I qualify for and receive SNAP benefits. This nutrition assistance has helped me dedicate myself to my education without the distraction of food insecurity. I'm also fortunate because I'm aware that UMBC has a food pantry, free farmers market, and other resources to support food insecure students, but it's not enough. Food insecurity is a growing problem. A 2023 survey of students at the University of Maryland College Park found that 27% of students face food insecurity. Rates are higher at community colleges. Inflation and the price of food is making things worse. Students who are food insecure have poor physical and mental health, poor academic performance, and increased dropout rates. I am concerned that most students struggling to meet their basic needs are unaware of these resources. House Bill 1090 would add a question to the Maryland financial aid form, allowing students to self-identify as food insecure. It is my hope that colleges will use this information to do targeted outreach to students to let them know about campus and community-based resources. Thank you.
Great job, Nicole. Any questions for Ms. Holt? Okay, thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Excuse me, Delegate Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also anyone else can answer this too. So the bill will add the question, but I think a good question, like if I'm an incoming student, I may not be aware of what my status will be in regards to that because perhaps things can change, once you leave your home and you go to school. My question is more about like the one-stop shop situation. If I'm already eligible for financial aid or other types of interventions, or is there a way we could be more proactive, not just as students self-identifying, but like just ensuring that they have the resources?
Sure. I mean, I think this is where our agency as a coordinating agency can work with our sister agency to do convenings, provide technical assistance for the campuses. So absolutely, I see your point. This is going to the financial aid office. How does then that get over to student services for them to say, okay, Emily needs some support here. So we can certainly provide some technical assistance on that front and coordinated effort.
I used to do some work in this space with the American College Health Association. So in many ways, I feel like we should just be funneling the information proactively, rather assuming that a student would just self-identify. That's just something I think is important.
Well, I was going to say, Delegate, and you were spot on that. I mean, you theoretically, what I think we would love, I know I would personally love our universities to do is, if you have a student that is full Pell eligible, in all likelihood, they're probably going to qualify for something else, or they're going to be very close, or they're going to need some sort of support because, even if they don't meet the threshold, they're probably still in need. And again, yeah, so I hear you on that one. Would love to work with you further on how we can build that out. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Great, thank you very much. That concludes the. Where are we at?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to note that we have, first of all, I wanted to acknowledge Nicole and to thank her for her testimony and to acknowledge that some of the students that she represents that she noted are here with us today. We have members from several HBCUs, well, all the HBCUs in the state of Maryland who are shadowing different legislators today. So I think it's really fitting that this bill, Delegate Solomon, that you brought today is being heard in front of these students, and they're able to see the advocacy for students of higher education in our state. So isn't that so?
It is, and I will say Nicole not only represents the folks in this room, but there are a number of really amazing student advocacy groups across the state that have worked on food insecurity issues. And I want to lift up our colleague, Delegate Davis, who passed through this committee the Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program, which we're building on as well.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee for this panel on this bill? Okay, and thank you, Delegate Ruff, for pointing that out. Actually, for all our guests who are here from the HBCUs, if they could just stand up, and just like to thank you for being here. Great, thank you very much. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 190. The committee will now move on to House Bill 920, Delegate Spiegel Institutions, a post-secondary education institutional debt report.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the BEST Committee. For the record, Ryan Spiegel for House Bill 920. This bill was previously introduced by Delegate Lopez last year, and it's designed to address a special problem in the world of student debt, something called institutional debt. And while we often hear about the student debt crisis in relation to other components such as federal student loans provided by the government or private student loans provided by financing companies, institutional debt is another type of debt that can also plague students long after they leave a college or university. And it's essentially debt that a student owes directly to the college or university that the university holds. And it can be for any number of reasons. It can include administrative fees that have incurred or other charges posted to a student's account. And the debt will follow the student into their professional lives the same way that other types of student loans do. And not only can institutions pursue students for those debts and impact their credit, but they can also even withhold information needed for careers, such as academic transcripts from students who owe this debt. And while one study estimates that approximately 125,000 Marylanders may owe as much as $332 million in this category of institutional debt, the truth is that the precise landscape of institutional debt in our state really remains unknown, because only the higher education institutions know what is owed and by whom, and there's currently no obligation for them to disclose that information. So this bill requires Maryland's higher ed institutions to report annually to the Maryland Higher Education Commission on the overall amount of debt students owe directly to the institution, alongside other important statistics such as demographics of the students who owe the debt, whether or not they were Pell Grant recipients, and the types of charges for which they owe the debt. The bill, to be clear, does not alter any institution's operating procedures or debt collection practices. It only requires them to report to the state the information they should already have on file. And that'll give Maryland policymakers and also consumers insight into the institutional debt landscape facing our residents so we can have a better picture not only of what kind of debt our institutions collect on, but also as to the people these practices impact. In 2022, the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia produced a report on institutional debt owed by Virginians, and the results showed notable inequities in who owes this debt, and that institutional debt is not a burden equally shared among the student population. In particular, Black and Hispanic students were disproportionately burdened by institutional debt, and the degree of the inequity was pretty striking. Without HB 920, we have absolutely no idea of the extent of that inequity here in Maryland. And beyond the demographic concerns, the sheer volume of overall institutional debt owed to schools in Maryland is also an unknown. So shining a light on this information will help us better understand the scope of the problem of this type of student debt so we can help develop appropriate policies and strategies for addressing it. And so I ask you for a favorable report on HB 920. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the committee. My name is Amy Salata, and I am the Outreach and Advocacy Manager at the Student Borrower Protection Center, a national nonprofit policy organization focused on ending the student debt crisis. We are proud to support HB 920. Very little is actually known about the scope of these debts because schools are the only stakeholders with this information. One national study based on survey data suggests that this is a $15 billion unregulated market affecting over 6 million students. That same study estimated that there is roughly $332 million in institutional debts in Maryland owed by 125,000 students, and that the average debts owed at certain school types in Maryland are significantly greater than the national averages. My organization also submitted a Maryland Public Information Act request to 12 of Maryland's public institutions late last year. 5 schools responded that they hold nearly $58 million in debt owed by almost 32,000 students. Institutional debt also raises serious equity issues. According to one school from our public information request, the debt owed by Pell Grant recipients nearly doubles what is owed by non-Pell Grant recipients. Women owe 4 times more debt than men at this institution, and Black students have 3 times more housing debt than students of other races. A similar law was enacted in Virginia, and the report it yielded showed that low-income students and Black and brown students disproportionately owe these debts relative to their enrollment populations. Critically, the state lacks the required information to truly understand the impact of institutional debt, and this bill would remedy that problem by simply requiring schools to report on their institutional debts to the Maryland Higher Education Commission so that policymakers can make informed, data-driven decisions about whether policy intervention is warranted. The fact that some schools do not collect these data points or that their systems cannot currently run the reports that the bill would require actually underscores how necessary this transparency is. The legislature should not allow the market to remain opaque simply because it is operated by schools. Further, in Virginia, schools were able to comply with the same data request for their legislator within a matter of months, demonstrating that these reporting requirements are feasible and reasonable. I ask for a favorable report on HB 920 and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Greetings, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and committee members. I'm Dr. Tisa Silver-Kennedy, and founder and executive director of the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. During my undergraduate days, I had a problem with parking meters. I paid each fine at the public safety building, and I came to know the clerk on a first-name basis. Now it's more than 20 years later, and we're still friends on Facebook. Sometimes I paid late, and as a result, I paid extra, but I was always able to pay, in large part because my father was and still is gracious and understanding. But many students don't have that support, so the fines accumulate, and so do the consequences. And the consequences can be far-reaching. I can recall one student who had her cap and gown withheld until she paid a balance of less than $500. And that's after 4 years, which cost her at least $80,000 to complete. She was almost denied the opportunity to participate in her graduation ceremony. We're helping another student right now who withdrew from classes at a point when his federal financial aid had to be returned to the government, creating a balance due to the institution. He's out of school and the bill is in collections. He wants to return, but he can't afford to pay out of pocket. I share these examples not to say that students should be released from their debt or that institutions should stop pursuing those debts, but to highlight the experiences of 2 people within this $332 million market operating in the state of Maryland. We want to know more about who participates in the market and how they are affected. From my own experience as a former manager in a university financial aid office, I can share two truths. The first is that students who are affected most greatly by institutional debt most often have the lowest capacity to pay those debts. And second, the information requested by this bill can provide the answers without causing a significant administrative burden. To that point, I'd like to acknowledge administrators from Allegheny College of Maryland, Bowie State, Prince George's Community College, Towson University, and Warwick Community College for sharing information about the collective $58 million in institutional debts they carry. They've shown that it can be done. Thank you so much for your time and consideration, and I ask that you give a favorable report on HB 920.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And may I have Ms. Volodin join me at the panel? Thank you. And then we have one virtual panel member as well. Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair Barnes, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Appropriations Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Michelle Guyton, District 42B in Baltimore County. And I want to say I'm thrilled to present this bill today. There have been 2 or 3 times in my 7 years here in the General Assembly that I've actually reached out to my fiscal note writers to say, could you please explain the fiscal note on this bill? Are you sure this is accurate? Is there anything we can do about it? But never before have we reached out because the fiscal note seems just too good to be true and then danced around because, in fact, it was accurate. So I am happy to bring you this bill. It sounds like the analysts don't get those happy calls very often about fiscal notes. So I respectfully ask your consideration of House Bill 643, which simply extends the eligibility for the Janet L. Hoffman Loan Assistance Program, repayment program, to include individuals who receive a veterinary or veterinary technician degree from an accredited Maryland institution of higher learning. So applicants would provide veterinary or vet tech services in the state for no less than 5 years, so you're committing to staying in Maryland, or they would provide many hours of volunteer veterinary or vet tech services in our animal shelters. According to the American Veterinary Medical Association, 1 in 3 students graduating in 2023 has an educational debt greater than $200,000 in veterinary sciences. The number has continually increased, with the amount of educational debt relentlessly also increasing, combined with the spiraling cost of veterinary medical education. So this loan assistance program was developed to help people who are going into the helping professions, right? However, and it's a great program, and thank you for doing it. Here's the good part. In 2026, we have appropriated $4.12 million to this fund. However, last year, only $511,222 were awarded to applicants. So this grant program, as important as it is, seems to be heavily overfunded, and this is consistent throughout the past several years. This bill, addition of the helping professionals for our animals, would not have any effect on the health of this program. So I've passed several pieces of legislation in the past couple of years because if you know me and you've been by my office, you know I love my animals. But most of it's to address a serious shortage among veterinary professionals in our state. So as a state, you all have also invested in a brand new University of Maryland Eastern Shore Veterinary Doctorate Program. So thank you for that. And that'll be opening, I understand, in 2026. This legislation will also support their efforts. This bill is fiscally responsible. It's a proposal that utilizes existing programs and funding to streamline administrative costs of becoming and serving a veterinarian or vet technician. So I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 643. Thank you.
Hello, Chair, Vice Chair, and esteemed committee. My name is Stacy Volodin, and I'm the new Maryland State Director for Humane World for Animals, formerly known as the Humane Society of the United States. I am here today as a partner with the Professional Animal Workers of Maryland, an organization that represents shelter workers and professionals within every county in the state. You'll hear from a veterinarian in private practice as far as how this bill can help the private practice realm, but I'm here speaking for the state shelters. They are greatly impacted by the veterinarian and vet tech shortage. As you can imagine, the pay is not necessarily quite as lucrative as private practice, and shelter medicine is an entirely different, I want to say beast, is entirely different, and it very much can impact the mental health of the professionals. They rely very much on volunteers as well, and they are seeing rampant shortage in volunteers. So the reason why this is so important is it impacts local governments. The shelters are having to go out into the private practice world to get animals taken care of or make decisions I don't think any of us would really want to make, but that is going to cost their budget instead of having, in most contexts, a shelter veterinarian or veterinarians come and volunteer a certain number of hours. So this bill answers that issue by requiring the 100 hours of volunteer work over a period of 100 hours a year over a period of at least 3 years. Thank you. Basically, this bill it helps our helpers. It helps the people who this program was established for, people who are servicing our community, and it helps save lives. So I respectfully urge a favorable report on House Bill 643.
Ashley, welcome. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you. I am Dr. Ashley Nichols. I am a practicing small animal veterinarian and immediate past president of the Maryland Veterinary Medical Association. I'm speaking today in favor of House Bill 643. This bill is an important opportunity to provide support to veterinary professionals who play a vital role in the health of our communities alongside their human medicine counterparts. I've been a veterinarian for 9 years and practicing in Maryland for 8. I've personally been affected by the burden high student loan debt has on veterinarians. Despite having a professional degree and expertise, it's not uncommon for veterinarians to be living paycheck to paycheck, including me. This is commonly due to the fact that student loan payments are either the same or frequently more than rent and mortgage payments. So when your student loan payment is that much, you just simply can't afford to save and do other things, let alone try to spend time volunteering with shelters and things like that. Because of the high student loan debt, a lot of times we are denied from lenders for business loans and or home loans, which affects our ability to settle in the community as well. So that further affects the state. These disparities, though, force many veterinarians to look for either higher paying work, such in private practice or corporate practice, or look to pick up extra shifts that pay at emergency facilities rather than volunteering with shelters, or going into government and corporate or government and state fields, which affects our ability to safeguard our food and other industries.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us and your testimony and the work you do, Dr. Nichols. Any questions for the witness? Okay, thank you all for being with us. Thanks for the bill, Delegate. Have a great day. All right, that ends the bill hearing. Last bill of the day is House Bill 531. Is anyone here from Delegate Simmons' office? I understand that Delegate Simmons is in another bill hearing, which is understandable, but we can't just hold the committee here, so I'm just going to do it. The bill requires all public institutions of higher education to establish remote learning accommodations, which include live stream classrooms, recorded lectures, virtual office hours, and remote access. Not sure I'll be able to answer them, but are there any questions? Okay, well, let Delegate Simmons know. We tried, but we have busy delegates here as well, so we're going to end the bill hearing.